Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here to talk about my favorite book couples from 2022. So this is the first year I'm doing this, and I'm really excited about it. I'm sure other people have done this before, but I first saw it from Sam at Thoughts on Tomes. She's been doing this for several years now, and I know she normally ranks all the books that she's read that have romantic elements in them. I'm not gonna do that. I'm just talking about my favorites and the ones I really want to talk about. And I wasn't like super systematic about this. Basically, I'm including it if there's a romantic subplot that is significant enough that I want to talk about it, and obviously if it's one that I really enjoyed. I got really excited for a second because I thought I had 22, like exactly 22, which would have been perfect for 2022. And then I realized I forgot one. 23 is still good. And I think some of them might be surprising because there's some books where it's like, I didn't love the book or like it wasn't a favorite, but the romantic element really stood out to me. And then there's some that are both. So if you guys have been here a while, see if you can maybe guess what my top 3 are. And I do own almost all of these books, but I'm just gonna put up pictures because it's easier. So starting off with number 23, I have The Will in the Wilds by Charlie N. Holmberg. This one is one of those books where I did not love the book overall, but I did really like the romance, and specifically there were like some scenes between the characters that I think were like some of the most interesting and compelling in the book, because I didn't always love the writing and there were other like character and story things I wasn't the biggest fan of, but the reason I was still very invested in the story is because I cared about the characters together. This is like an enemies to lovers situation, but it's one of those where the enemies part is more because of like what kind of person, like what species they are almost, because one of them is sort of like a fair folk type person and the other is a human. I'm not going to try and give too much detail for some of these or we'll be here a long time, but that is number 23. And number 22, I said Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of English Dragons by Quenby Olson. This was like a really fun, lovely, cozy book, and I really enjoyed the main romance. It's very subtle and very like understated and sweet, but I just really liked it, and there was something really satisfying about like reading a story where the main character is so like practical and ordinary and she still gets a really lovely romance. I just really enjoyed that, and that was one element of the book that I did I think was like especially well done, but like overall I did really enjoy that one. Number 21, I have The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary. Now I actually would have thought this one would be higher, but I think the reason it maybe wasn't is because even though I love both characters and I love them together, the things that stand out about that book for me are how much I enjoyed the character development for each of them, and like the way they like handled the romantic relationship, if that makes sense, which doesn't make me like the book any less. I actually really enjoyed this one. I know that's gotten mixed reviews, but I did really love these characters together, and I mentioned before that I think the male lead is the only contemporary book hero to make it onto my book boyfriend shelf, so I think that's pretty impressive. Number 20, I have kind of a wild card. That is Masks and Shadows by Stephanie Burgess. This is a book that in a way was a disappointment because the first chunk of it I was loving and I thought it could be like a 4.5 or a 5 star, and that did not end up happening, but there were still things that I really loved about it, and obviously one of those is the main relationship. This actually could have been higher because I did really like the dynamics between the characters. We have like an opera singer who's one of the last castrati, and then we also have this woman who is a widow and she's been like married off for political gain, and she kind of just wants to like exist for a while before her family tries to do that again. So she ends up going to stay with her sister at like this royal palace. Her sister is basically the mistress of the king and everyone knows it, but everyone kind of pretends not to know it. And I just think like the class situation and the political situation, it made for really interesting backstories and interactions for these two characters, especially because the female lead is also very musical and I liked seeing them bond over that. They don't really hit it off at first, for I think pretty understandable reasons, but I really liked seeing their relationship develop. The reason this one is not higher is because I wish that there had been more of a change in how the heroine like thought about the male lead, because I understand for like the time period, you know, people would say very like ignorant or like hateful things about the male character and like his gender and the fact that he is one of the castrati and everything, so I understand all of that, but I think there are still ways to communicate in narration that is not how the like the woman who loves him feels, you know. I feel like that was a little weird. That could have been done better, but I did still really like these characters together. Like their romance was actually I think one of my favorite parts of the book, because I mentioned that the fantasy elements were not worked into the historical parts in a way that I enjoyed, but I did really like these two main characters together. Oh, I should have mentioned, by the way, but I am not including rereads on this list unless it is a book that I read for the first time in 2022 and then also read again, which is what happened with number 19, and that is Agnes Gray by Anne Bronte. I read this one twice last year and really enjoyed it both times. I really liked Agnes as a main character. I know that is somewhat controversial. A lot of people feel like she's kind of a goody two-shoes, but I really felt for her. I really cared about her, and I loved her love interest so much. I mean, like, you know that he's gonna be good when, like, two of his big scenes involve, like, taking care of people's animals. Like, I just really loved him, and I loved how much the two of them, like, cared about each other and respected each other. I liked the conversations they had. This is a very, very, again, like, understated romantic subplot. I think sometimes people are disappointed because they expect that to be a bigger part of this book, and it's really not. But I found it a really welcome element in the story. It's just, it makes me happy to see Agnes get to be happy, and I did really, really love the man that she ends up with. I just thought that was really sweet. And I like the way they talk to each other and interact as well. I wish we had gotten to see even more of that. Like, we had seen more of their dialogue happen rather than just kind of hearing it summarized, but I did really enjoy them. Number 18, I have Daisies and Devotions by Josie S. Kilpack. This is a proper romance, and this is the one I've liked most in the series so far, which is kind of shocking because if you guys have been here a while, you know I am not a fan of Friends to Lovers usually, or like I'm a hard sell on it. It has to be done really well for me to enjoy it, and I really loved this one. It also helps that it has one of my favorite romance tropes in it, which is like the matchmaker trope, kind of. Basically, they are both like involved in the other person's love life, and then they realize that they actually like them, and that is something I am always trash for. I love it so much, and I really like the way it was done here. I also liked both of our main characters a lot. I especially loved Marianne, but I really liked Timothy as well, and I feel like even though he sometimes does frustrating things, it was very, like, he was still very likable, and you could see that he was, like, trying his best, you know? Number 17, I have Gilded Ashes by Rosamund Hodge. Rosamund Hodge is one of my favorite authors. I just love the way that she writes characters and relationships and stories, so it's not a surprise this one is on my list. This is a novella, and I feel like for being such a short story, she does a really good job of, like, developing the characters and the setting and the main relationship as well. Like, I did really love it. I would have liked to see even more of them together just because it is so short, but even considering that, I just really, really liked the way that their interactions played out, and it's like very quick in a way because it is a novella, but it still really works for me, and it still convinced me, and I still love this couple. Also involves a few favorite romance tropes of mine, so that doesn't hurt. And I've had a couple people ask me about a good place to start with Rosamund Hodge, and I never really have a good answer, but this one might actually be one to think about trying if you are looking to try her, like, writing and her kind of storytelling style. Then, number 16, I have Rose in Bloom by Louisa May Alcott. I had very mixed feelings about these two books overall, but one of the things that I loved almost without reservation is the main romance. I can't believe I, like, picked the right love interest. You guys know that I am really bad at that. Not good at picking, like, when there's more than one love interest option, I have an abysmal track record at choosing who the main character is going to end up with. So not only was I shocked that I predicted it, but I was so happy that it ended up being like who I predicted it was. I don't want to, like, give too much away because you really don't know who the main character is going to end up with for a lot of it. Also, you just have to accept that all of the love interest options are her cousins because that's when this book was written. But yeah, even though I had very mixed feelings about some of the plot and the storytelling choices, some of the, like, themes, like the way that the, like, female characters were handled near the end, and the of its time elements, like the racism, definitely not perfect books. I think I only gave them like 3.5 or 3.75 stars, so, like, did not blow me away, but I was a little bit obsessed with the main romance. Like, I really, really loved it. I loved their scenes together. There's, like, a few lines that are, like, so understated, but because of who is saying them and like what the situation is. It's just incredibly romantic and I love that. Number 15, I have Long Shadow by Olivia Atwater. This is the third book in the Regency Fairy Tales series, and I have loved every single one of these, and I have loved the couple in every single one of these. This one is also a sapphic couple, and I really, really loved seeing these two women find comfort and strength in each other. Our main character is actually somebody that we know from other books in the series, and I really loved seeing her kind of like, well, at the center of her story more here. And I really enjoyed the way the romance developed. I really loved the way that this book handled some of the like conflicts between them. Like it felt, even though they had very different like situations, it felt like the way the book handled those was very thoughtful and very respectful, and they felt very much like equals in the relationship, which I really appreciated. And I also just really love basically everything else about this book too, like the writing, and there's kind of like a murder mystery element in this one a little bit, and the themes about grief and moving on. If you guys remember from when I reviewed this one, there are a couple of little things about the ending that didn't land as well for me, but that might be based on like personal interpretation or like personal things that I've been thinking about more than anything else. So overall, just a really fantastic series, and I did really love this romance. It was lovely. Number 14 is The Stepsister and the Slipper by Nina Claire. This is one of the books in the A Villains Ever After series, and I think this has been my favorite so far. This is a perfect example of a book where like it is just so up my alley that I love it, like specifically the romance element, because it is a novella, you know, it is pretty short, and I could see other people not feeling like there was enough time spent on certain aspects, but I, like, it did so many things that I'm trash for that I had no choice but to love it. So this is a Cinderella retelling where we are following one of the wicked stepsisters, but maybe she's not so wicked after all. Maybe she just knows what she wants and she goes after it, and she's not afraid to use her charm and her beauty to get it, and she just wants to take care of the people she cares about, and if she steps on a few toes, that's fine. So I really, really loved her, and that is like a character type that I really enjoy, where it's like the mean girl who's not really a mean girl. I love that. The romance is also so good because it's a little bit of the matchmaker trope, and there's even a moment where they have to pretend to be married to each other. So there's just like, this is just catnip for me. Like there were a lot of things about it I really loved, and while it wasn't perfect, I think the ending could have had more time spent on it. I really, really loved this romance, so that's why it ranks so high. Number 13, I put Redemptor by Jordan Ifueko. Yeah, this is one of my favorite books of the year. I think this duology is just truly one of the best written fantasy series of the last few years, and the fact that Jordan Ifueko can do all of this world building and character work and relationship growth and like themes, the fact that she can do all of that in 2 books when other authors struggle to do it in like a zillion, I think is pretty amazing. And I do really love the main romance. The only reason that this one isn't even higher on the list, because I really, really loved it in the first book, is that I usually like lose a little bit of interest once the characters like admit and start acting on their feelings. I just like, the build-up is the part that I love and that I am most invested in. So because this is the second book, we didn't really have that as much, but I still really love them, and they still rank really high considering it's a relationship that like was already developed. Like this, there's not a lot of books that could make it on this list when it's not like the getting together part of the romance, so that's still pretty impressive. Number 12, I have Darling by Kay Ancrum, and this is kind of a funny one for me to include because the romance part of this is minuscule, but I loved it so much that I don't care. This is like mostly a contemporary thriller mystery type book, and it's also a Peter Pan retelling or interpretation, but I think it's one of those that however you feel about Peter Pan or whatever your experience with it is, you could still get a lot out of this one and enjoy one like regardless, which I think is cool. And it does some things that I think are hard to pull off in a Peter Pan retelling in a way that I find compelling, but Kay Ancrum does them beautifully. And yeah, like the romance is such a tiny piece of this, but I loved it anyway, and I love the focus on consent, and just like the way these characters like talk to each other and tease each other and respect each other. It just makes me so happy. And there are some like pretty dark elements or intense elements in this book, so it was nice to have a romance that was like not like that at all. Number 11 is Rondo Allegro by Sherwood Smith. This has a marriage of convenience trope, which I really love, and I think it was done really well here. I'll actually link any like favorites videos where I talk about these books more in depth in case you want to hear more about things that like aren't the romance. But I just really love these main characters, and I really loved seeing them together. And this also, I think like it's a slow burn romance, but that also I think continues after, how do I want to explain this? It's a slow burn romance, but a good chunk of the book takes place after they've already gotten together, which, as I've said, is something I'm not usually interested in, so this one is pretty impressive. I also think I mentioned this in the wrap-up, but the relationship vibes kind of remind me a little bit of A Civil Contract by Georgette Heyer, so if you read that one and you liked it but you wanted more romance, this is a good book for you. Okay, we are into our top 10. Number 10 is A Darkness at the Door by Intisar Kanani. I have really enjoyed this whole series, and yeah, I love our main character so much. Her name is Ray. She's fantastic, and she's just one of those characters who like loves with so much fierceness that like she uses her righteous anger to love people or like, you know, to like make change in the world, and I love that. And the romance is fantastic. Again, the only reason this one isn't even farther up the list is because I think I loved the romance even more in the first book in this duology, because that was kind of like the will they won't they and like the build up and everything, but I still thought the relationship was fantastic, and there are parts of how it's handled that I just found like really, really refreshing. I feel like this shouldn't be considered a spoiler, so I'll just like mention it, but like Ray does not want to have children, and that is not treated as like a horrible thing or as something that should like disqualify her from like falling in love and having a romance. So I just really, really loved that book, love those characters, and love those characters together. Number 9 is The Romantic Agenda by Claire Kann. This one a lot of people don't like, and I understand why, but the romance just worked for me so much. I also think it's very cool that our main character is asexual and this is a romance. Like, that's definitely not something that gets published a lot, or at least not by like mainstream publishers. And I do have some issues with like the way the writing was done, kind of clunky, or like some of the plot developments. Like, there are issues I have with this book, but because it's a romance and I just love the romance so much, like, I forgave a lot, honestly. And I really, really loved the hero. His name is Fox, and he is just, he's like, I am not always into the grumpy sunshine thing, because I feel like a lot of times the grumpy character just comes off as like nasty. Like, I prefer the grumpy kind where it's like they're just very like reserved and people interpret that as being grumpy or standoffish, and they're actually not. And that's like what Fox is. He's just like such a sweetheart. I love him. He might also make the book boyfriend shelf now that I'm thinking about it, but yeah, I really love him and Joy together. And I also like that he is so like willing and like focused on like understanding what, like, where Joy is coming from. Like, there are some times where he, you know, makes assumptions or he says something kind of ignorant about Joy being asexual, and Joy rightfully calls him on it, and he does better, and I really like that. Also, this has a little bit of fake dating, which is something I always enjoy. And it's also kind of a like love interest swap kind of thing, which is another thing I love. So again, this is, I feel like a lot of the books on this list are things where it's like they just really, they like are my tropes, which I think makes sense because romance is so dependent on your personal reading taste, I think even more than other parts of books. So anyway, I love this one. A lot of people don't, but I do. Number 8 is Winterkeep by Kristen Kishore, and this is one that I really can't say a lot about because it's so far into the series, but I just want to say that I have been waiting for this, so I finally got what I wanted. It's like a pretty small element of the book, but I really loved it and it made me happy. Number 7 is Tosh Hart's Tolstoy by Catherine Ormsby. This is another one that a lot of people don't like, but I thought this was a really fantastic contemporary. I feel like the author does a great job of writing like messy characters and relationships that aren't overly frustrating to read, because like that kind of messiness is realistic, but I think there are ways to write it that are still an enjoyable reading experience as opposed to just being irritated with everyone in the book. And even though there were a couple of characters in this one that I could not stand for a good chunk of it, overall I really did love the cast of characters, and I really liked the way the romance was handled. This is another one that is a very small element of the story, so I don't want to like oversell it, But I really loved how it was handled, and yeah, just I really, really enjoyed this book, and I really liked the elements of like doing a YouTube adaptation of Anna Karenina. I thought that was a really fun element as well. Number 6 is Staff and Crown by W.R. Gingell. This has actually been my favorite in this series so far. This is like a series of companion novels that I think you probably should read in order, and a lot of them are kind of inspired by different fairy tales. I don't know that this one is specifically, but this is like kind of a magical school novel, but the magical school part is not at all important, so I guess don't go into it expecting that to be a big deal. It's more just like it's like the politics of a magical school, which I really loved. Like, I enjoy magical school books or settings where there is more actual like school element, you know, and like learning about magic, but this was more about the political situation, and I actually really liked that. And of course I also really loved the romance. This is another one that's like a subplot, so it's not like it's not like the main thing that's happening, but every time we would get this little crumb of it, it made me so happy. And it was also something that like I was a little unsure how I was going to feel about it, because I kind of had predicted this was going to happen, like this romance, and I wasn't sure how I'd feel about it, but I actually feel like it was handled really well. There is like a few years difference between them, and there are a couple of other things that make this a little complicated as well, but I feel like the book actually did a really good job of like still putting them on an equal playing field and everything, and it was just like, it was really funny and really enjoyable to see our main character like not understand like not really get why like her romantic interest was like acting the way he was, because it was the kind of thing where like she didn't know even when other people knew what was going on. Like, she had no idea that he was like interested in her. And that's another thing, is like I'm usually not a fan of romances where one person has feelings way before the other and you're just waiting for the other person to catch up, but for whatever reason it worked for me here, so I loved it. Number 5 is Rosemarch by Olivia Blackburn. This was such, I was gonna say pleasant surprise, but it's not that I didn't expect to enjoy it. I think this is just a really underhyped book, like an underhyped series. It's the first in a duology, and I really, really like the like political situation, and like the world building I think is really good. But I also, of course, really love the romance and how like believably complicated it is. Like, there are things about the first book related to where these characters come from and how they have to go about their mission that make it very, very difficult for them to pursue like any kind of relationship with each other, and we really see them like struggle with that in the first book. And also there are things about the way the plot is structured that means that you kind of get to like watch the buildup of their relationship like multiple times, which, as you'll probably guess, I love. And it didn't feel frustrating. Like, it was very like believable why it would happen this way, and it didn't feel like the book was just being repetitive. Like, you actually, as the reader, you could see things developing even if the characters couldn't always, and I really, really love both of these characters and their relationship, and I can't wait to finish the series, hopefully this year. Number 4 is A Single Thread of Moonlight by Laura Wood. This is another one where it has a couple of my favorite tropes in it, and I did not know that going into this book. So I was already having a good time, and then I was having a really like even better time because I was getting what I wanted. This is funny because this is the second book by this author that I have really loved, and the other one that I loved from her, I had kind of a similar experience where the first time like we meet the male lead, I'm like, I don't like you. I don't want you in this book. Get out of here. And then by the end, I really, really loved them, and I loved them together. And I also really like how respectful he was of our main character. Like, I really enjoyed the story overall, and I like how both of the books I've loved from this author have been very cozy feeling, but that also have some elements of more serious things. Like, they're not like overly focused on those things or anything, but I do like the way that they kind of incorporate some of that into this very like cozy and what I feel is very romantic like relationship or story. And also, like, there's a lot of other plot things going on too. I don't want to make it sound like this is a romance, because it's not. It's a historical fiction that is also a loose retelling of Cinderella, which I thought was really clever. So the main plot thing is not the romance. I'm just saying the romance was very good. Okay guys, we are at our top 3. Yeah, let me know if you guessed what any of these were. But my number 3, This is kind of shocking. I don't think this is ever, like, I've never done a video like this before, but if I were to rank my favorite couples from previous years, I don't know that a contemporary would ever be in the top 3, but here we are, and that is So This Is Christmas by Jenny Holiday. I loved this so much. This was my favorite romance that I read last year. And you guys will have seen I had some mixed experiences with the other romances I read. But I just loved this one so much. And it's also like a holiday romance, like a Christmas romance, which even though I love Christmas, I do not love Christmas books. So that was also a pleasant surprise. And it's also like kind of a royalty one, but not really, because I don't like royalty romances. So actually what happens is it is a like management consultant. Like the heroine is also named Kara, which is fun. And then the hero is named Matteo, and he is, I forget what his title is, but he's basically like the guy who does most of the work for the royal family. He's kind of like the man behind the scenes and everything. So he works with the royal family, but he is not in the royal family, which I like a lot more. And I just really like them. Like they're really at odds for the first part of this book, but I think it's understandable. I am like really, really picky about hate to love in contemporaries. Like even though hate to love is one of my favorite tropes when it's done really well, I think it's very difficult to do it well in a contemporary. And this is, I think, one of the better versions I've seen. I just really loved them together, and how even when they didn't like each other or they were like being unpleasant to each other, they still always like respected the other person. It's hard to explain, but it's like, you know in Much Ado About Nothing, where it's like they have all that great banter about how much they can't stand each other, but you can tell they still really respect each other as like opponents and as people. It was like that. Yeah, I just loved this book. It made me really happy. I also really loved how close both characters were to their families. I thought the like setting was super cozy. Like this book just made me so happy, and I really, really love the romance. Number 2 is The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I have a whole spoiler-free review on this book, which I will link below. I'm a little obsessed with it. Like basically for the like month and a half after I read it, this book was like most of my personality, which is a great feeling, you know? And one of the main reasons is the relationship and how messy it was. This kind of reads like a historical fantasy, but if you were hesitant about historical fantasy, I think this would be a great one to start with, because it's just like vaguely flavored that way. It's not like a particular like setting or time period or anything. It just feels kind of historical. And there are like light magic elements, but it's really like a fantasy of manners, which I really love. And I think this is one of my favorites that I've read, which is not surprising because I love Silvia Moreno Garcia. Yeah, but I love her writing. I love the way that she can write characters who are unlikable, but you don't hate reading about them. Because that's the thing, is like sometimes there are characters where it's like, I understand where you're coming from and why you are unlikable and like what purpose you serve in the story, but man, I hate it every time we're in your head. And Silvia Moreno Garcia never does that for me. I just think that's incredible. There's like a lot of like messy relationships here, and just like the yearning and the longing and the tension is just top notch. It is so good. I loved it so much. I was like messaging Julia, my friend Julia from Shakespeare and Such, while I was reading this, because she had read and loved it earlier, and I just like could not contain myself. Like there were moments in this book where I like very literally had to like put it down and take a moment because I was so invested. And I love that. So yeah, it's my second favorite romance, I think, of the year, or my second favorite couple, I should say. Okay. Number 1. Are you guys ready? I was going to say that my earrings are like a slight hint, but then I realized I don't know if the video where I talk about my earrings has gone up yet, so that's not at all helpful. But let me know if you guys can guess what it is in the comments. But my favorite couple from the books that I read in 2022 is Peter and Beatrix from the Subversive series, or the Clandestine Magic trilogy by Colleen Cowley. I love these characters so much. Like this is one of those series where I think every book I gave 4 stars. Like there are things I think it could have done better, but like it's so compelling. The story is so well done. The characterization is fantastic, and the romance, I mean, it was my favorite that I read last year. So, and I read a lot of books last year, so I think that's pretty impressive. And I've said, like, I feel like every time I talk about these books, I kind of go through the same thing, but I totally understand why this might not work as well for everybody, because there are some like power issues in the first book especially, but that is like something the book very specifically like points out and like works on. And I personally felt like it was handled in a way that was very convincing and thoughtful. Like some of the things that like Peter does are like not okay, and the book doesn't like try to make you think they're okay, but I think it does a really good job of showing you why he does what he does, without excusing it, and while still showing you like, yes, of course Beatrix would be like furious about this. It's not like harassment or anything. I'm just not saying what it is for like spoiler reasons, but like there are unethical things that he does and that make their relationship incredibly complicated. And the book doesn't brush those aside, but I think it does a really great job of showing why Peter, even though he hates doing these things, he will do them to save people's lives, you know, to do something that he thinks outweighs his own discomfort. I love these characters so much. And the reason, I think one of the reasons too that this had to be #1 is, even though like I've been saying I'm a harder sell on like the parts of the relationship where they've already like acted on it or gotten together, and I was still thoroughly invested in their romance like throughout the entire trilogy, and I think that's pretty amazing because that's very rare. And also, if you were wondering, these are pomegranate seeds. My earrings are supposed to look like pomegranate seeds, so that was kind of the clue, because there's like a pomegranate thing that is like very important in the story, that is just like the tension. It's so good. Another thing that I really liked about this series is like, people talk about like the forced proximity trope. It's not one that I think of as being something I really enjoy, but kind of an exception is when it's a fantasy and there are like magical things that basically tie these characters together. Like they have like a certain kind of connection that is like based on their magic. That I find like really interesting, and I think that can be really fun in a romance. So that was also here. Okay, so those are my top 23 bookish couples that I read about in 2022. Let me know if you have any thoughts on this ranking or like feelings about these couples. Let me know if you're surprised by any of these, like which ones are on the list, or like, you know, what their ranking was. I'd love to hear that. And if you're somebody who enjoys like romances in books, let me know what one of your favorites was. Bonus points if it wasn't actually a romance book, because even though obviously one of my top 3 was, in general, I feel like I am much more of a romantic subplot person than I am like that being the main plot, you know? So thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!